Common Misconceptions, 8.0, Jurisdictions. November 22, 2020 by Anna von Reitz. You are now beginning to see the tip of the iceberg, and just how complex the inner workings of what we call government, and the language of government, can be. Take an innocent word like state, or person, and it can and does immediately morph into a monster with great multiplicity of meaning, most of which is undisclosed except by context, and some of which can't be discerned either by sight or sound. Remember and take note that Ellie Mae Johansen at sea looks and sounds exactly the same as Ellie Mae Johansen standing on dry land, but depending on where she actually is and what she is doing, she is standing under different forms of law. On the land, generally speaking, she is standing under the public law, the law we all automatically think of and which we assume is in play. At sea, she is standing under the private law, the law of ships and corporations and private business enterprises and military services. These different forms of law arise in different jurisdictions, and it is time to more fully describe what a jurisdiction is and how they arise. They arise from nature. The natural world is organized according to an observable plan that includes three realms which we call air, land, and sea. So, there are three basic jurisdictions. But notice this, there is one jurisdiction that bumps up against and intermingles and distributes itself through all three, the realm of water, both fresh and saltwater. You have the actual sea called the high seas, you have the maritime jurisdiction, where salt and freshwater meet, and you have surface water and groundwater, and you have water vapor in the atmosphere, too. Wherever and whenever the jurisdictions mix or meld or rub against each other, and that is wherever water is involved, we have problems when we use this model to organize our governmental and business affairs. The maritime jurisdiction, the tidewater and coastal interface, where the freshwater meets the sea, has always been especially problematic, and so has the merchant marine service that occupies this peculiar jurisdiction. Though we landsmen don't often think of it, pause a moment and think about the vast flotilla of ships of every nation flowing to and fro along sea lanes, and carrying unimaginable tonnage of cargo to ports of every country. This is, by far, and has long been, the largest trade and enterprise operation on Earth, and maritime law is commensurately international, complex, and octopus-like in nature. Because maritime trade and commerce, note that word, commerce, occupies such a command position in determining the flow of goods on the sea and the ownership of cargo being transported and all the details of maritime insurance, employment, contracts, and retirement, display of national colors, and dispensation of government on board these civilian vessels, the maritime law was extended to the land jurisdiction via the adoption of post roads that function as dry sea lanes in the 18th century to promote the safe conduct and ease of distribution of goods and cargoes on dry land. These roads and the service stations associated with them are under the command of postmasters on the land and postmasters on the sea. This extension of maritime law onto the land is what Ben Franklin was engaged in when he and George Washington began surveying post roads in America well prior to the Revolution. Please note that these post roads that connect every post office and their easements and right-of-ways together actually belong to the land jurisdiction of this country and naturally fall under the direction of the land jurisdiction government, our federation of states doing business as the United States of America. These ownership interests and controls are exercised and organized as postal districts, administered by postal district courts, and are administered by postmasters, not postmasters. Please also note that when you step off the dock, these roads become sea lanes and you are suddenly in the international jurisdiction of the sea and operating under a different system of maritime law administered by the British King. The difference is that on the land, the operations of these international enterprises have to obey the public law, but on the sea, the operations of these international business enterprises are private, the captain is king of his ship, and the corporation's policies are law. In the 19th century, these inroads of maritime jurisdiction onto the land were increased via the addition of railroad and utility corridors and their easements, which also operate in international jurisdiction and under maritime law. More millions of acres of our land were subsumed under the supervision of the postal districts and made subject to international maritime law, albeit, still subject to administration under the public law, including our constitutions. Much of the corruption we are seeing now is a direct result of corporations involved in doing business in these special maritime jurisdictions, running rampant and usurping upon the land jurisdiction and undermining and disobeying public law. The Queen and her government and the Lord Mayor of London and the Government of Westminster and the British Crown are all particularly and especially responsible for this misadministration and usurpation in breach of trust. That said, the rest of us have a responsibility, too, and that responsibility is to keep them in their briny place and to recognize and exercise our land jurisdiction and man up our lawful government in that jurisdiction, our unincorporated federation doing business as the United States of America. Our postmasters are called to duty, our postal district courts are convened, and all the lawyers in this country are in need of a wake-up call. The King's courts that have been operating on our land and soil and enforcing sea-going maritime law on our general population are operating as crime syndicates in violation of their treaties, their commercial service contracts, and in violation of the constitutions that allow their presence here. Most seriously of all, they are operating in gross breach of trust. This circumstance gives rise to widespread endemic and institutionalized criminality and misapplication of law. If the bar attorneys do not wish to be considered accomplices to these crimes, they and the hired jurists acting as judges in these courts need to hike up their skirts, dust off the actual applicable public law, and turn tail. Otherwise, they are completely recognizable as inland pirates, and the kindest retribution reserved for inland pirates is public hanging. Other options are gibbeting and flaying. This is not the first time that maritime law has usurped upon the land jurisdiction, and until we change our entire scheme and rationale for the application of jurisdiction and law, it is unlikely to be the last. What you can do about this is to become aware of these issues and educate yourselves and your neighbors and come forward as birthright Americans, join your state assemblies, and reopen all your own courts, including the postal district courts, which are hanging on by a thread. Learn how to quickly and succinctly tell these British bounders who you are and where you stand and which law you stand under. And make it stick. Realize that your landlubber local postmasters are also public notaries, and your post office authority is key to restoring and exercising your authority over your land. And to redeeming control of and benefit from all the millions of acres of American land that have been subsumed as post road, railroad, and utility corridors and easements. Go to www.theamericanstatesassembly.net.